Every driver wants their engine to last longer, run smoother, and maybe even pick up a little extra horsepower. And if you've ever walked down the automotive aisle, you've seen rows of shiny bottles promising just that. Miracle additives that claim to fix leaks, restore power, and even rebuild worn engines. Sounds great, right? Here's the problem. Most of those bottles are nothing more than expensive scams. Some are so bad they've been hit with lawsuits after engines failed by the thousands. Others use outdated chemistry that turns your oil into sludge, eats bearings alive, or destroys catalytic converters. And the worst part? They're still being sold today, just under new names. In this video, I'm breaking down the 11 engine oil additives you should never put in your car, the ones that quietly kill engines from the inside out. But don't worry, I'm not just here to scare you. At the end, I'll also show you the 5 additives that actually work. Ones I've seen tested in real engines, trusted by professionals, and in some cases, I've used myself. So before you pour anything into your oil, stick around, because what you don't know about these so-called miracle additives could cost you thousands in repairs, or even a whole engine. And the ones that actually work, they might just save your motor when nothing else will. Alright, let's kick things off with number 11, graphite-based additives. Graphite sounds slick. After all, it's what makes pencils glide across paper. So why not use it to make engines smoother? That's the sales pitch. But here's the ugly truth. Dumping graphite into your oil is like pouring pencil shavings straight into your crankcase. It doesn't stay suspended, it doesn't flow evenly, and it sure doesn't protect the way they claim. Instead, it clumps, settles, and turns into a gritty sludge that blocks tiny oil passages. I once tore down a small block Ford that had been running graphite oil additive for just a few months. The oil pan was coated in thick black paste, lifters were starving for oil, and half the galleries were half blocked. The owner thought he was upgrading his oil. Instead, he was choking his engine to death 1 mile at a time. And here's another problem most people don't realize. Graphite actually holds heat once it cakes onto parts. Instead of pulling heat away like clean oil should, it insulates and traps it right where you don't want it. That means hotter bearings, more friction, and shorter engine life. Bottom line, graphite belongs in pencils and lock lubricants, not your crankcase. Next up on the list, number 10, PTFE, Teflon-based additives. Teflon in oil? That's like pouring melted plastic into your crankcase. Sounds high-tech on the label, but in reality, it's one of the worst gimmicks the auto industry ever pushed. PTFE, better known as Teflon, is the same stuff used in non-stick frying pans. The idea is that it coats your engine parts and makes them slippery. Slick 50 was the big brand behind this trick, claiming reduced friction and longer life. But here's the problem. PTFE doesn't dissolve in oil, it's a solid. So instead of flowing smoothly through tiny oil passages, it clumps up. It settles. It turns into a sticky white sludge that gums up bearings and clogs oil filters. I've torn down engines that were treated with PTFE additives, and the insides looked like someone dumped cottage cheese into the crankcase. Scored bearings, starved lifters, blocked passages, all because of a so-called miracle product. And if you think I'm exaggerating, here's the kicker. Even DuPont, the company that invented Teflon, told oil additive companies to stop using it in engines back in the 1990s. If the manufacturer of the stuff itself says it doesn't belong in your oil, that should tell you something. Modern engines are especially vulnerable. With high-pressure oil systems and tiny galleries, they can't handle chunks of PTFE floating around. It might make things quieter at first, but over time, it's choking your engine from the inside out. Bottom line, Teflon belongs on frying pans, not in your motor oil. Up next, this one has taken out more engines than it saved. Number 9, stop leak additives. Oil spots on the driveway. A rear main seal that's starting to drip. It's tempting to grab a bottle of stop leak, pour it in, and hope the problem disappears. And at first, it might. The trick behind these additives is simple. They use harsh chemicals to swell rubber seals. That swelling slows the leak for a while, but over time the rubber becomes brittle, cracks apart, and leaks even worse than before. I've seen it firsthand. A customer with a small valve cover leak dumped in stop leak instead of replacing the gasket. 2 months later, his engine wasn't just dripping, it was ticking and losing pressure. The swollen seal had broken down, and chunks of it were circulating through the oil system. That's the real danger. Once those chemicals start moving through the engine, they don't just stay in one place. They plug filters, clog lifters, and choke off the small oil passages modern engines rely on. What started as a $40 gasket job turned into a full rebuild. A quick pour-in fix feels easy, but it usually comes with a heavy price tag later. Coming in at number 8, magnetic oil additives. Yes, this one really exists. Some companies market oil additives that claim they can magnetize your oil, so it clings better to engine parts. Sounds futuristic, almost like something out of a comic book. But here's the problem. It makes absolutely no sense. Oil isn't magnetic. Your crankshaft, bearings, and pistons don't suddenly develop some magnetic field that attracts oil molecules. That's not chemistry, that's marketing fantasy. So, what's actually in these bottles? Usually it's just a thickened oil loaded with metallic flakes or mystery particles to make it look special. I once had a customer bring in a bottle of so-called magnetic additive. It shimmered like glitter nail polish. Pour that into an engine, and all you're really doing is running abrasive particles through every oil passage. The damage adds up fast. I cut open an oil filter from a car that had been using one of these gimmicks. The filter element was sparkling with tiny metallic bits. That wasn't magnetic protection. That was metal sludge grinding away at cam lobes and bearings. Here's the thing. If an additive can't show real-world test results, no API certification, no OEM approval, no SAE papers, it doesn't belong in your engine. Magnetic oil additives are nothing more than snake oil with glitter inside. They don't protect. They scratch, clog, and shorten engine life. Now, here's a sneaky one you'll still see on shelves today. Number 7, compression restorers. If you've ever seen a bottle claiming to restore lost compression, it sounds almost magical. Pour it in, and suddenly those tired piston rings and leaky valves are good as new. But that's not how engines work. What these products really are is thick goop, often loaded with soft metals like copper or tin. When poured into oil, they temporarily fill gaps and coat worn cylinder walls. That can bump compression just enough to quiet a knock or reduce smoking. And for a short while, it feels like the engine is healthier. But it's a trick. They don't repair worn rings, they don't fix valves, and they certainly don't rebuild cylinder walls. All they do is mask the symptoms, while creating new problems in the background. I've seen filters blocked solid by these additives, starving the top end of oil. In one case, a customer poured in a compression restorer before a road trip, thinking it would extend his Honda's life. 300 miles later, the engine seized. The additive had clogged the filter and cut off lubrication to the head. These products are marketed as a miracle cure, but engines don't heal themselves with a bottle. If compression is gone, it means parts are worn, and the only fix is mechanical. New rings, valves, or a rebuild. Compression restorers don't buy you time. They just hide the problem until it turns into a catastrophic failure. Next up, number 6, solvent-based flush additives. Engine flush in a bottle. The label usually promises to clean out years of sludge and varnish in just one oil change. Sounds like a miracle, but what's actually inside? In most cases, it's nothing more than kerosene, naphtha, or mineral spirits. Basically paint thinner for your crankcase. Yes, it'll strip out deposits, but here's the catch. It also strips away the protective film that your bearings, cam lobes, and cylinder walls depend on. The oil thins down so much that metal starts touching metal. I've seen it firsthand. One customer poured a flush additive into his car before an oil change, let it idle, then drove home. By the time he pulled in the driveway, the engine was knocking like a jackhammer. The solvents had reduced the oil's viscosity so badly that the bearings lost their cushion. That quick clean ended up costing him a full rebuild. It gets even worse in turbocharged engines. Turbos spin at over 100,000 RPM and rely on a thin, pressurized film of oil. When a flush thins that oil down, turbo seals don't stand a chance. I've pulled apart turbos that failed after just one round of flush additives. Seals cooked, shafts scored, and bearings fried. Sludge and varnish aren't fun, but they don't destroy an engine overnight if you're changing oil on schedule. Forcing it all out at once with harsh solvents? That's like blasting a century-old wooden barn with a pressure washer. Sure, you'll clean it, but you'll also blow it apart. If you really want a cleaner engine, stick to quality oil and regular changes. Solvent flushes don't fix engines, they finish them off. Coming in at number 5, Zinc Overload, ZDDP in modern cars. ZDDP, short for zinc dialkyl dithiaphosphate, was once the king of anti-wear additives. Back in the muscle car era, flat tappet camshafts depended on it. Without that extra layer of zinc and phosphorus, cam lobes would grind themselves flat in no time. For those old-school V8s, ZDDP was liquid gold. But fast forward to today's engines, and the story changes. Modern oils are carefully balanced for emission systems and catalytic converters. Dumping in extra ZDDP doesn't mean more protection, it means more damage. Here's why. When zinc burns off, it coats oxygen sensors and catalytic converters with a glassy layer that chokes them out. I've seen it happen more than once. A customer with a 2014 F-150 thought he was doing his engine a favor by adding not 1, but 2 bottles of a zinc booster. Within 2,000 miles, his check engine light was on, his fuel economy had tanked, and his catalytic converter was toast. That's a $1,200 mistake, caused by too much of what used to be a good thing. The truth is, modern oils already have the right balance of zinc for today's engines. Engineers know exactly how much the catalytic system can handle, and they design oils around it. Piling on more isn't protecting anything. It's just cutting the lifespan of your emission system in half. If you've got a classic car with flat tappet cams, sure, ZDDP is still your best friend, but for anything modern with a catalytic converter, extra zinc is a fast track to expensive repairs. At number 4, we've got chlorinated paraffins. Some additives are advertised as extreme pressure protection. Sounds good, right? More protection when metal meets metal. But in reality, these so-called wonder chemicals are loaded with chlorinated paraffins. And once they heat up inside your engine, they don't protect anything. They turn into hydrochloric acid. Yes, the same corrosive stuff used to strip rust off steel. Now picture that circulating through your bearings, cam journals, and cylinder walls. Instead of lubrication, you've just created a chemical reaction that literally eats away at your engine from the inside. I once had a customer pour one of these additives into an old Chevy 350. 2 oil changes later, the main bearings were pitted, the cam lobes showed etching, and the oil itself smelled burnt. That wasn't normal wear. That was chemical corrosion caused by the additive. Chlorinated paraffins were banned in many countries because of how toxic they are, not just to engines, but to the environment. Yet some cheap oil treatments still sneak them in under vague labels like high-load additive or EP protection. No modern OEM allows this stuff in their oil formulations. Engineers know it does more harm than good. What's sold as extra protection is really a time bomb. The longer it's in your engine, the more damage it does. At number 3, we've got excessive MOS2, cheap Moly additives. Molybdenum disulfide, or MOS2, is one of those additives that actually has real science behind it. In the right formula, from the right manufacturer, it reduces friction, smooths out engines, and even extends their life. But here's the catch. Too much of a good thing turns into a nightmare. The problem with cheap knockoff Moly additives is particle size and balance. Quality formulas keep the Moly ultrafine and suspended, so it bonds evenly to metal surfaces. The bargain bin stuff? It's clumpy, inconsistent powder that sinks to the bottom of your oil and cakes up like wet ash. I tore down an older BMW that had been running back-to-back bottles of generic Moly additive. The oil filter was plugged solid with black sludge, oil pressure had dropped dangerously low, and the pan was full of a paste that looked more like tar than lubricant. That wasn't wear protection. It was an engine suffocating under its own oil. Engines today run with tighter tolerances and smaller oil passages than ever before. They can't handle powdered metal floating around in their crankcase. And once that sludge starts circulating, it doesn't just reduce flow. It starves critical parts like lifters, cam bearings, and timing components. When it comes to Moly, precision matters. The right dose in a lab-tested formula can genuinely help, but doubling up, mixing brands, or grabbing a cheap no-name bottle is asking for clogged filters, oil starvation, and a short trip to the rebuild shop. Coming in at number 2, mystery oil conditioners. Walk down the additives aisle and you'll see plenty of bottles with vague names like oil conditioner or engine treatment. The labels usually promise smoother running, better performance, or restored protection. But when you look closer, there's one thing missing: transparency. No ingredients, no test data, just marketing fluff. And that's the biggest red flag. If a company won't tell you what's in their additive, it's probably because you wouldn't like the answer. Most of these so-called conditioners are nothing more than thickeners, dyes, and chemical soup, designed to make oil look or feel different, without offering any real protection. I once had a Dodge Ram come into the shop that had been treated with one of these mystery bottles. The owner said it was supposed to improve lubrication. Instead, his oil pressure dropped and the engine started ticking. When I pulled the filter apart, the oil had turned into a molasses-like sludge. Whatever was in that bottle didn't condition anything. It just destabilized the oil. Real additives that work are backed by data: API certifications, OEM approvals, or independent testing. Mystery products hide behind vague claims and proprietary blends. That's code for, we don't want you to know what's in it. Engines are built to exact tolerances. Pouring in a chemical cocktail with unknown ingredients is rolling the dice with thousands of dollars worth of hardware. And 9 times out of 10, the engine loses. At number 1, we've got nanometal suspensions, fake nanotech. Nanotechnology is one of the hottest buzzwords in the automotive world. Companies love to slap nano on the label and promise futuristic protection. Microscopic particles that rebuild worn surfaces, reduce friction, and extend engine life. Sounds incredible. But here's the problem. Most of these so-called nano oil additives are pure gimmick. What you're usually getting is nothing more than ground-up metallic powder suspended in oil. Pour it in, and instead of coating parts with some magical protective film, those particles circulate like liquid sandpaper. They scratch bearings, clog filters, and settle in oil passages where they block flow. I cut open a filter from a turbocharged Mazda that had been running one of these additives. The media inside looked like it had been sprinkled with glitter. That glitter wasn't protection, it was the very thing that killed the turbo in under 2 weeks. The other issue is credibility. Real nanotech takes years of research, lab validation, and strict control over particle size and chemistry. You don't get that from a $20 bottle with a flashy label and no test data. Most of these nano products don't carry a single API certification or OEM approval, just promises that sound more like science fiction than science fact. Now, to be fair, there is one exception, a product that actually uses engineered ceramic nanoparticles backed by research from NASA and the US Department of Energy. And we'll get to that later in the section on additives that really do work. But 99% of the so-called nanometal products on the shelf, they're not futuristic. They're just expensive engine killers dressed up in fancy marketing. By now, you've seen just how many so-called miracle additives can quietly wreck an engine. From snake oil quick fixes to outright toxic chemistry, most of what's on the shelf isn't worth a second glance. But here's the good news. Not every additive is a scam. There are a few, and only a few, that actually deliver on their promises. These are the ones backed by real science, trusted by professional mechanics, and in some cases, even approved by manufacturers themselves. I'm talking about additives that reduce friction where it matters most, protect older engines that weren't built for today's oil formulations, and even smooth out problems in high mileage or hard-working vehicles. So, let's flip the script. We've covered the 11 that you should never touch. Now, let's break down the 5 engine oil additives that really work, the ones that can extend engine life, improve performance, and actually earn a spot in your garage. Next up at number 5, Lucas Heavy Duty Oil Stabilizer. Some additives survive for decades for a reason, and Lucas Heavy Duty Oil Stabilizer is one of them. If you've been around repair shops or truck bays, you've probably seen this familiar white bottle sitting on the shelf. Mechanics have been reaching for it since the 1980s, and it's still here because it actually serves a purpose. Lucas Stabilizer works by slightly thickening engine oil. That extra viscosity can make a big difference in high mileage engines with worn bearings, loose tolerances, or noisy lifters. I've seen it bump up oil pressure in tired motors that were struggling at idle, quiet down top-end ticking in work trucks, and help old tow rigs survive long hauls under heavy loads. It's especially popular with diesel owners and anyone running engines that see constant strain, because in those cases, a little more oil film strength can mean the difference between smooth operation and metal-on-metal wear. But here's the catch. It's not a magic fix. Use it smart. A quart added to a worn engine can help stabilize pressure and reduce noise. Dumping in half the bottle or running it in brand new tight tolerance engines, that's asking for aeration, reduced flow, and more problems than you started with. Lucas Heavy Duty Oil Stabilizer is one of the few thickening additives that actually earns its place. Not because it rebuilds engines, not because it pretends to fix leaks, but because in the right situation, it genuinely helps an old or overworked motor hang on longer. Coming in at number 4, BGMOA Motor Oil Additive. Not every great additive comes in flashy packaging. In fact, one of the most trusted names in the business looks pretty plain on the outside. BGMOA, short for motor oil additive, has been a staple in professional service shops for decades, and there's a good reason for that. While most gimmicky additives are thick goop or mystery chemicals, MOA is built on solid chemistry. It's a carefully balanced blend of detergents, dispersants, oxidation inhibitors, and anti-wear agents. What that means in plain English, it helps your oil stay cleaner, resist breakdown under heat, and keep its protective film intact for longer. I've seen it used in everything from high-mileage commuter cars to turbocharged imports that run hot every single day. Engines that were prone to burning oil started holding onto it longer. Oil samples came back with less contamination after extended intervals. And cars that were pushed hard in stop-and-go traffic kept their internals cleaner when MOA was part of the oil. This is one of those additives that isn't trying to reinvent the wheel. It doesn't claim to rebuild compression, magnetize oil, or do 10 things at once. It does one job: extend and strengthen the oil you're already running. And it does it well. Professional mechanics don't keep using a product for decades unless it actually helps customers' cars last longer. BGMOA has earned its spot because it consistently works in the real world, not just in marketing brochures. At number 3, we've got Archoil AR9100. If you've spent any time around diesel owners, especially Ford Power Stroke guys, you've probably heard the name Archoil AR9100. And unlike most of the junk on store shelves, this additive has earned its reputation the hard way, by fixing real problems. The big one is stiction. If you're not familiar with it, stiction happens in hydraulic electronic unit injectors, the kind used in 6.0-liter and 7.3-liter Power Strokes. Over time, varnish and oil breakdown cause the internal components of the injectors to stick, leading to hard cold starts, rough idle, poor throttle response, and even misfires. AR9100 tackles that head-on. It cleans out the sticky deposits and restores smooth movement inside those injectors. I've seen trucks that struggled to start on cold mornings fire right up after a week of running with Archoil. Idle noise drops, throttle response sharpens, and oil pressure stabilizes under heavy loads. For fleet owners and work trucks, that kind of reliability is worth its weight in gold. And it's not just diesels. Gasoline engines that run hot or hard can also benefit from its friction-modifying chemistry. Less wear on startup, smoother operation, and better stability when the oil is under stress. What makes AR9100 different is that it doesn't try to be a miracle cure for everything. It solves a very specific problem, stiction, and adds measurable anti-wear protection along the way. That's why it's trusted by performance shops, fleets, and diesel owners who know what's at stake when injectors start acting up. Ignore stiction long enough, and it'll take out your injectors, your oil system, and your wallet. Use AR9100 in the right engine, and it's one of the few additives that actually saves you from expensive repairs. Coming in at number 2, Liqui Moly MOS2 Anti-Friction. We already talked about how cheap Moly additives can wreck an engine, but here's the flip side. When it's done right, molybdenum disulfide is one of the most effective friction reducers you can put in an oil system. And nobody does it better than Liqui Moly's MOS2 Anti-Friction. Liqui Moly is a German brand that's been building a reputation for decades, not with gimmicks, but with chemistry that's actually approved by European automakers. Their MOS2 formula uses ultrafine particles, small enough to stay suspended in oil without clumping or settling. That's the key difference. Instead of creating sludge, the Moly plates onto metal surfaces, forming a protective layer that reduces wear, even under high stress. the results aren't just on paper. I've run MOS2 in high-mileage imports and work vehicles, and the changes are noticeable. Cold starts are smoother, idle is quieter, and oil temps run a little cooler on long hauls. Independent lab tests show lower wear metals in oil samples, which means the additive is doing exactly what it's supposed to do, protecting parts where it counts. And it's not just enthusiasts or shade tree mechanics using it. In Europe, Liqui Moly additives are OEM approved in some vehicles. That's a level of credibility most oil additives could only dream of. The best part? It doesn't try to be 10 things at once. MOS2 isn't a leak stopper, a magic power booster, or a miracle cure. It's a proven friction modifier, and when used in the right amount, it genuinely extends the life of your engine. And finally, at number 1, TriboTEX Nano Additive. After tearing apart fake nanotech earlier in the video, you're probably wondering if any of it actually works. And surprisingly, yes. There's one exception that proves the rule: TriboTEX. Unlike the $20 bottles of nano magic with glittery metal particles, TriboTEX is built on real research, funded by NASA and the US Department of Energy. Instead of random ground-up metals, it uses engineered ceramic nanoparticles, designed to bond to metal surfaces under heat and pressure. Here's what makes it unique. Those particles don't just sit in the oil, they actually reverse surface wear. They fill microscopic scratches and restore a smoother finish on moving parts. That means less friction, lower operating temps, and more stable oil pressure. It doesn't fix a blown motor, but in an engine that still has life left, it can make a measurable difference. I've seen TriboTEX used in high-mileage Subarus with noisy lifters, and within a few weeks the tick was dramatically quieter. I've seen it stabilize oil temps in engines that used to run hot, and reduce wear metals in oil samples after just one interval. This isn't overnight magic. It's steady, science-backed improvement. The one downside? It isn't cheap. A single treatment can cost several times more than a bottle of snake oil from the parts store. But unlike the gimmicks, it has the data and the real-world results to back up the price tag. If you're running a worn but still solid engine and you want to extend its life, TriboTEX is the rare additive that actually delivers. It's not marketing hype. It's real science put to work in your crankcase. And it's the perfect example of why a handful of additives still earn their place. So, there you have it. 11 so-called oil additives that do more harm than good, and 5 that actually earn their keep. The takeaway is simple. Most bottles on the shelf are nothing but marketing hype that can wreck your engine or drain your wallet. But if you stick to the proven few, products like Liqui Moly, MOS2, Archoil AR9100, or TriboTEX, you're putting science, not snake oil, into your crankcase. Remember, the best protection always comes from using high-quality oil and changing it on schedule. Additives should only ever be the finishing touch, not the foundation. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you tried any of these additives yourself? Did they work, or were they a waste of money? Drop your story in the comments below, because I know a lot of people watching could learn from your experience. And if this breakdown helped you avoid a $1,200 repair bill or saved you from pouring junk into your engine, do me a favor. Hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next video.